Welcome to the Times of Israel's What Matters Now, a weekly podcast diving into one issue affecting Israel and the Jewish world. I'm your host, Deputy Editor Amanda Borschel-Dan, here with a very special guest, public intellectual and author, Micah Goodman. Micah, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, Amanda. I'm so happy to be here with you today.
It is always such a pleasure to speak with you. And even though we're neighbors and, may I say it, friends, it so rarely happens that we get to sit across the table from each other. So again, thank you so much for taking the time.
Let's dive in.
All right. So the table, if we want to refer to the table was set last night. We're recording on Tuesday. The table was set last night and all the characters were lined up. We had U.S. President Donald Trump. We had Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu facing each other, and the table was set for an announcement that didn't come, an announcement for a potential ceasefire/hostage release deal. It's quite possible that it may work out this week. There's a lot of optimism floating through the air, but that did not happen. And so we're here 21 months into the war that began on October 7th when Hamas invaded southern Israel, murdering 1,200 and taking 251 people back to Gaza as hostages. There are now some 50 hostages in Gaza, 20 of whom we consider probably alive. And this is the situation as we face it today. I just want to add one more wrinkle. We are also after the 12-day war between Israel and Iran. So you and I have spoken through these 21 months. And at one point, you were very adamant, very passionate about the idea that Israel needs to effect change in Iran, either regime change or flat out attack it. So I want to start with that, if you don't mind. I want to start talking about that war that just happened.
So this war that just happened did something that transformed Israel's strategic situation. After October 7th and October 8th, Israel seemed very weak, very vulnerable. It seemed like our military was dysfunctioning. And it was a shocking surprise because it was a double surprise. We weren't only shocked by Hamas, by how highly functional it was in October 7th, we were also shocked by the IDF, how not functioning it was in October 7th. That was a double surprise. And this war, I think, gave us all an opportunity to breathe again, the 12-day war, that our army still has it. And it's not only the 12-day war, it's also everything that happened, from the beepers with Nasrallah, with Hezbollah. And here's maybe a way to put it, like from a very broad and strategic point of view. Yahya Sinwar, when he attacked Israel on October 7th, he had an idea in mind. He made two bets. His first bet was that Israel is vulnerable because it's divided from within. And we know that he was highly observing the internal polarization in Israel. And he made a bet that if he'll attack Israel, Israel will collapse into its own contradictions, into its own divisions. That was one bet. He had a second bet. He's a part of an axis. Iran, Hezbollah, proxies in Iraq, proxies in Syria, Palestinians in Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, the Houthis, where they come from, the Houthis. He's a part of, and if he attacks Israel, the axis will join him. The axis will jump in. We know this. Our the Shabak, the Shin Bet found we have findings that we knew that this is what he thought will happen. He'll attack Israel and everyone will join him. That's a double bet. That Israel will split and that they will unite. He got both bets wrong. When he attacks Israel, Israel didn't split. Israel was united in order to fight back. And he also bet that they will unite. They will all be there for each other. All the proxies will be there for each other. And he got that bet wrong also. That's what's interesting.
Except the Houthis.
Besides the Houthis, that's right.
And Hezbollah, of course.
But actually, Hezbollah had an opportunity in October 7th to join the war all in, full blown. And by the way, if Hezbollah would have joined the war all in October 7th, if they're invading the north with their Radwan forces, while the Nukhba forces are invading in the south, that might have been a situation that our military would have a very hard time to control, because you add another aspect to that. Besides being invaded from the south and from the north, you'd have Hezbollah accurate missiles falling on strategic sites, electricity, the ports, central command locations, and we'd be going into chaos. And when it would seem that Israel is losing control, that would motivate other forces to join in. West Bank, the Palestinian Authority, I assume they don't want to go to war with Israel. But if it seems like Israel is going down, they'll definitely want to be in where they would see the right side of history. They might have joined the violent parts of Israeli Arabs, meaning we might have been in a situation which is irreversible. We could have been, I don't know, I would say with not low probability. And it only depended on one thing, Hezbollah joining in the first 12 hours. Hezbollah missed out on that window of opportunity, which meant we were able to fight this war where we were fighting the Gaza stage of the war. Hezbollah was irritating us, but it wasn't all in. Hezbollah didn't really come in to save Gaza. And then we were fighting Hezbollah. Iran didn't come in to save Hezbollah. And then we were fighting Iran, the 12-day war. Hezbollah didn't come in to save Iran, which means we had, because of the lack of solidarity between the proxies, we had the privilege to fight them one by one. And that is one of the reasons for our victory. Sinwar made 2 bets. He was betting on our division, on their unity, and he got them both wrong. We united, and they didn't. They weren't there for each other. And since he got 2 bets, both of his bets wrong, that tells us a deeper picture about that Middle East is not what it seems like. It seems like the Islamists are united and the Jews are divided. Maybe the reality is more complicated than that. Sinwar definitely got it wrong.
Okay, I have a couple questions, comments on what you just said. Comment number 1, I think in terms of the Palestinian Authority, they're so disunified, meaning they are so against Hamas. It doesn't surprise me in the least that they didn't join up with Hamas because they're so against each other in terms of pitting each other, brother against brother. And another comment is, it really appears to me that Israel, the army, does great against foes that are outside the land of Israel. But once we're talking about the land of Israel / Gaza, we have a real problem.
It seems like there's a weird law of physics going on. The larger the enemy, the better we are.
Right, exactly.
Right? Iran, this regional empire, the regional superpower, within 2.5 days, we had air dominance over them. Hezbollah, probably the largest, the most effective militia in the world, we know how to take care of them. Hamas, this crummy Sunni Palestinian organization in Gaza, we have the hardest time. So it's like this weird reverse law of physics that the larger it is, the easier it is for us. The smaller it is, the harder it is for us. It's a weird situation that we're in. And regarding a remark with the Palestinian Authority, I agree with you. The Palestinian Authority hates Hamas and they wouldn't come to save Hamas. But hypothetically, if we're in a situation where it seems like Israel altogether is going down, at that moment, if they have to choose sides, it's very clear which side they would have chosen.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% on that. But I do question your thesis that the Islamists of the region wouldn't want to dominate Israel and combine together in some kind of end of days type warfare situation. Yeah. So how do you spell that out a little bit more for me?
Well, now Islamism is different than Islam. Okay. Islam is an idea of it's a religion of how you worship God, connect yourself to God, and they have this whole world of faith and rituals. Islamism is not about how an individual worships gods, but how a society is supposed to be managed and run. So Islamism is like, if Islam is like there's Christianity and Judaism, there's Islam. But Islamism, there's like capitalism, communism, fascism, there's Islamism. It's the founding father of Islamism, Hassan al-Banna, 1928, said, Islam is the solution. Islam huwa al-hal. Islam is a solution, just like communists thought that communism is a solution. So it's not about how an individual worships God, it's how a society functions under the sovereignty of the Sharia, of God's law. In today's versions of Islamism, there's two different there's a tension between two different ideas. One idea is the idea of fiqh al-waqi, I'm probably not saying it correctly, that we have to be pragmatic, observe the world, understand reality, understand the real strategic equations of reality, like who's weak, who's strong, and accommodate to reality. But there's also a messianic aspect, which means you don't see reality. The end of days is near, And instead of listening to reality and accommodating to reality, we have to impose our ideas on reality. And while the Iranians, and to some extent, Hezbollah, were more pragmatic, they were, okay, let's wait. In 2023, they were observing Israel. They were seeing the internal divisions in Israel. They realized, well, before we attack Israel, before we activate our grand plan to destroy Israel, let's wait for Iran to get a nuclear bomb. So let's wait for the proxies to get stronger, and let's wait for the internal divisions in Israel to be broader. Let's wait. And in Islam, there's the idea of sabir, which means patience. And the Quran says that God stands with the people who have patience. Patience, sabir. Sinwar's paradigm was more messianic. This is the time, this is the moment. God wants us to attack here and now. And he was interpreting the internal divisions in Israel as an invitation by God to attack Israel now. This is the opportunity. So the internal tension within Islamism between pragmatism and messianism was played out as a disagreement between the different branches of the octopus, where Iran was more about waiting, sabir, waiting, and Sinwar was messianic. Let's go for it. Let's do it now. And it's interesting. We are now in our second Commonwealth, in Beit Sheni, in the Second Temple. So in 67, I mean, not 1967, but 67, when the Romans came in order to put down the rebellion of the Jews against the Roman Empire. And they managed to put down to the rebellion in the north, in the Galilee, but they still had Jerusalem. And then Aspicianus, which was leading the Roman soldiers to defeat the rebellion of the Jews, literally from Judea. So they had intelligence that the Jews in Jerusalem are polarized between different political camps. Yochanan Migush Chalav, Shimon Bar Giora. They had different ideological and political camps, and they were clashing with each other. And his advisors said, this is an opportunity to attack them. Let's go there and attack them now. And Aspicianus answers, and this is all documented by Josephus Flavius. Aspicianus answers, that's not the right advice to attack the Jews now. If they're divided, what we should do is let them destroy each other. Let's wait and attack them when they're much, much weaker. Now, what's interesting, that disagreement between Aspicianus and his advisors was replayed in 2023. Amit Sar, the head of the Chativat HaMechkar in Amman, the part in the Israeli intelligence that is in charge of making the assessments of what our enemies are thinking about. So he wrote in 2023, this came out, by the way, by Chaim Levinson. It only came out after October 7th, but he wrote in 2023 to the prime minister that our enemies are noticing that we're fighting, and there is a dilemma between the Iranians that think we should wait, and there is other voices that think we should attack now. So the only difference between now, this attack, and the attack, the same dilemma that the Romans had in the Second Temple, the axis of what they call the axis of resistance, Jabhat el-Mukawama, had in 2023. Just with one difference. In the Second Temple, it was Aspicianus, the paradigm of patience. Let the Jews fight. Let them weaken themselves, and then we'll attack them. It was the patience that won that debate. It was the impatient, messianic part that won this debate. Sinwar just said, I'm going for it, and the West will join me. And as I said, as we opened, he got it wrong. The Jews were united, and his allies didn't really join him.
Okay, is it possible that the messianism has died out with Hamas, and now they're more into the patience aspect? Since this war is going on, they are not budging from their 3 sticking points in the negotiations. Is it possible that they're now at the point where they say, you know what? We see that if we do nothing, if we just survive, we have won this war, and the Israelis are internally combusting again. They're again fighting each other. They're again divisive. And here we go. Let's just sit back.
I have a hard time trying to assess the intentions and the thinking of Hamas and where this is going at this moment in history. There were voices within Hamas, like Khaled Mashal, that was skeptical regarding the alliance of the Sunni organization with Iran, with the Shiites. And you have to assume that those voices that were always skeptical regarding the alliance with Iran, now, after it seemed like Iran didn't come out to save Hamas, didn't come out to save Hezbollah, Iran did not back its proxies, and now Iran is hurt and injured by Israel. You could only imagine, is that those voices are now have a larger voice within the internal conversation of Hamas. But maybe we have to look at a bigger picture here, Amanda. Because it's not, when we ask regarding solidarity between our enemies, if we take a larger look, and not only regionally, but globally. So Neil Ferguson, the British historian, he has a very interesting observation of how we should understand the world today. And he calls the situation of the world today Cold War II. He's trying to coin that idea that we're in Cold War, not World War III, but Cold War II. And just like Cold War I, there were two coalitions of countries facing each other, fighting each other in a Cold War. So Cold War II, we have one coalition, and its center is China. And they have Russia, North Korea, Iran, and another coalition in the center of the United States. The United States, the West, even though there's South Korea, Japan, Australia, we call that the West. Okay, not only Western countries, but we call it the West. And something was exposed in this war. Something very interesting was exposed. And that was that the coalition that's anti-Western doesn't have real solidarity within it. And that was exposed in the 12th Day War because, Russia didn't really do much to help out Iran. And China, not only that it didn't help out Iran had only real one strategic way to threaten the West, and that is to shut down the Meitzarei Hormuz, the Hormuz Straits. And China asked them not to do that because China would be massively screwed if they would have done that, because a lot of its oil comes from the Persian Gulf. Which means China put pressure on Iran, effectively shutting down one of its only strategic paths out of the bad situation they were in, which means de facto, China was a part of the forces that were closing on Iran. Not that was their intention, but de facto, as a result, they were closing on Iran, which means something is exposed. The anti-Western coalition is very weak, and the Axis, there's not much solidarity there. At the same time, the Western coalition showed real solidarity. When Israel, in an unprecedented way, when Israel and the U.S. attack Iran together, that shows there is an axis there. So something was exposed in the 12th day that the Western coalition that we're always taught, that people always say that the West is going down and there's no more solidarity and everyone is there for themselves and isolationists are winning. Well, there's their moments of Western solidarity and lack of anti-Western solidarity. That's on a global level. And on a regional level, the anti-Israeli coalition didn't show much solidarity. And now what Israel is trying to do, this is almost fantasy. I'm entering now fantasy land, right? But the idea of building a, normalization, building a alliance between Israel, Saudi Arabia, maybe Syria, maybe Lebanon, like this idea of building a new alliance, and especially with the Gulf states, that's an alliance that if you think about what this alliance is, it's trying to do to Iran what Iran did to Israel. Iran built an axis of forces surrounding Israel in order to isolate Israel and weaken Israel. Now Israel is going, and America are going to try to build an axis of pro-Western countries surrounding Iran, isolating Iran, completing the v'na'afochu, what they did to us, now we're trying to do to them. So on a regional level, just like on a global level, this war showed, as opposed to what many people thought, including myself, it shows there was no solidarity in the anti-Western forces and some solidarity within the Western forces. The same thing on a regional level. There was no real solidarity between the Islamist forces, and we might build an alliance of pro-Western forces. which means if we think about this like as a globally, Israel is bringing good news to the world. It's bringing solidarity to the West. It's exposing lack of solidarity in the anti-West. It might be bring good news to the region, creating solidarity within the region and exposing lack of solidarity among the Islamists. And here's a big question. Israel is bringing so much solidarity to the world. Does it have solidarity within Israel itself? Or is the paradox of the Netanyahu government is that it could bring so much peace to the world outside Israel, to Western while it's increasing the divisions within Israel itself. That might be the paradox of this moment.
Let's go to a short break. And we're back. I'm Amanda Borschel-Dan here with philosopher, author, public intellectual Micah Goodman. Micah, before we turn into the paradox of Netanyahu and what's happening in domestic politics, etc., I want to sharpen your risk board a little bit more. And I want to hear where you see Europe, for example, in this constellation, because during this 12-day war, they were not the partners in shooting down all the Iranian ballistic missiles like they were in the past. And of course, they're condemning Israel nonstop over the war that is ongoing in Gaza, even as we're describing a lofty plan of peace for the region.
So it's a very big paradox because Europe, well, when we think about Europe, we have to think about like three Europes. The international organizations, there's the nation states, and then there's the NGOs, which are smaller than states. Israel always does very bad with the NGOs, with the organizations that are smaller than states. With the international organizations that are larger than the states, we always do bad, the UN. And the only allies you might have are the nation states themselves, right? Like France, Germany, and England. And there it's very complicated. Now, among the NGOs and the international organizations, there is a constant attempt to criminalize Israel. Now, what happens if in the Middle East, there's a process of normalization? So there'll be a competition between two processes, the process of legitimizing Israel and the process of criminalizing Israel. And paradoxically, the process of legitimizing Israel is within the Middle East, and the process of criminalizing Israel is in Europe. So now, we could only assume that now there'll be a competition if Israel goes to normalization, there'll be a competition between these two processes. And we could only assume that the process of legitimization will help restrain the process of criminalization.
Okay, that's really interesting. And of course, neither of us are prophets, so we don't exactly know how that will play out. But let's also talk about Gaza, the inability to close down the war or the inability to get to this total victory that Netanyahu has so clearly desired since the beginning.
The war in Gaza right now is very clear that continuing the war will probably be against the will of the world, including our best allies, and against the will of the majority of the Israeli people. So fighting Hamas while you're going against not only your allies' public opinions, but also your internal public opinion will probably, it's hard to see that going right. So regarding the Gaza piece of this, there's a catch here. On the one hand, we have to end the war in order to move to normalization. We have to end the war in order to move to normalization and to complete the process that will isolate Iran in the region, to do to Iran what Iran did to us, and to complete the v'nafuch, to complete the flipping upside down the strategic equation. But the problem is that Gaza has no future as long as Hamas is there. Because you think about it, if Hamas is still there, which foreign money will make Saudi money will make an investment in Gaza? If Hamas is there, anything they will build will be destroyed. You have to think like it's not a big chess game, right? To think like 17 moves into the future, just one move. If Hamas is there, the chances are eventually they'll shoot a missile at Israel. And then what will Israel do? It will bomb Gaza. Therefore, everything you built will be destroyed. And since this scenario is so probable, the risk is calculated and no one will invest money in Gaza. So here's the thing. The only way to get to we have to end the war in order to get to the day after a normalization. But if Hamas is there, you can't get to the day after a normalization. So this is a catch.
And you can't end the war, according to at least our prime minister. Hamas is there, the war will not end.
Hamas is so weak now. So we could have the Hezbollah model, where Hezbollah still exists, but we're present in South Lebanon, and we are actively protecting Israel, not passively, not waiting for Hezbollah to attack us. We are actively, when we have intelligence about a Hezbollah terrorist planning something, rebuilding something, bang, we knock them out. And now that model that's tested and tried in Lebanon could work in Gaza. Therefore, I think Israel could be protected using the active model of Lebanon and not the passive pre-October 7th paradigm of Israel. And we already restored our deterrence in the 12-day war and the beepers. I think Israel has a future if Hamas is still on the other side. Gaza doesn't have a future if Hamas is on the other side. If Gaza doesn't have a future, it'll be very hard to move forward in normalization.
The one big difference, obviously, between Hezbollah and Hamas is that Hezbollah is within a different sovereign nation, right? There's Lebanon, there's the infrastructure of the Lebanese government, and we're hearing increased readiness to de-arm Hezbollah from the Lebanese forces, right? Hamas is the ruling sovereign part of the Gaza Strip, meaning there is no one above them.
So there's a question. Is there an arrangement, a day after arrangement, where there's a new sovereign in Gaza? Which means Hamas moves to the backstage and Israel practices in front of Hamas what it does now versus Hezbollah. There's no real perfect answer. It's all very, very messy. But Israel has to ask, okay, what's the price we have to pay in Gaza in order to move forward into normalization? And assuming the question is how we calculate the security benefits of normalization, if they are larger than the security threats and weaknesses that we have and deal with at Gaza.
That is a very logical equation. And it's quite possible that were people to divide themselves from any kind of emotion, that equation would be so clear.
Yeah.
Right. So clear. However, what Hamas did to Israel, invading our land, murdering, slaughtering, and the ensuing war, which has killed hundreds and hundreds of soldiers, I just wonder if the Israeli people would be so ready to essentially reverse the clock and go back to, say it's even 2014, right? That war, what happened after that war? When we finished that war, basically rewind the clock.
I think Israelis are looking at this war as a whole. This is a war that had the war is what is the story of two surprise attacks. The surprise attack that Hamas surprised us, and there's a surprise attack that we surprised Iran. And between these two surprise attacks, that's the story of the war. And just imagine that the war that began attacking Be'eri ended with air domination over Tehran. Yeah, it ended in Tehran. So I think we did restore deterrence. It is very clear in the Middle East that there is a new Israel here. It's a bold, tough Israel. It's an Israel that you don't want to mess with. We have a few good years of high deterrence. And I think that's that level of deterrence, that's what gives us the credit to be more flexible now in moving forward and building this anti-Iran coalition, and also paying the price that it costs in order to move forward. Think about it, Amanda. Sinwar made a bet that will attack Israel and Hezbollah will join. Bibi made a bet that will attack Iran and America will join. The story of this war is that Sinwar got it wrong and Israel got it right. America joined Israel. And if I would have told you a few months ago that Israel's going to attack Iran and here's what's not going to happen. Hezbollah is not going to protect Iran. It's not going to join. And here's what is going to happen. America's going to join. If I tell you that, you would have said, no, both scenarios are impossible and both scenarios became a reality. I think in light of that, after victory, how did Churchill say? Magnanimity, right? This is the moment because of Israel restored its deterrence. Now it has the credit to be a little bit more flexible in Gaza in order to move forward to a new architecture for the Middle East.
Okay, so let's finish with talking about domestic politics, because this, in a way, is also Bibi's paradox. He
Yes.
is standing up for the greater good, shall we say, in having this vision of changing the region into an anti-Iran regional axis, et cetera, as you've described. However, his coalition is not going to hold together.
It's not going to hold together. So again, Israel that showed that there's solidarity within Western civilization globally and trying to create solidarity regionally lacks under Netanyahu's leadership solidarity within Israel. Here's a very big question. What's Netanyahu's big move? Because trying to build the anti-Iranian Middle Eastern alliance, normalization, everything, that divides the Israeli right. Now, the Israeli right has always been divided. The Israeli right is two different ideologies meshed together under one coalition. One ideology is very messianic. The other is very conservative.
Sounds very familiar, Micah, to what you described about the Islamists.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's right. These are universal archetypes. Now, I'm not talking about parties or specific politicians. I'm talking about real Israelis on the ground. You have Israelis that are on the right because they have high level of suspicion towards our neighbors, because they are very hawkish regarding national security, and because they are very conservative. They're against taking real risks in this area. That's one branch of right-wingerism, if that's a word. And another is the opposite. Is they're not conservative, they're messianic. They don't want to conserve the status quo. They want to radically change it. They're not pragmatic. They believe that in some way we could take real risks because God will be with us. So like two different, but the schism within the Israeli right between these two ideologies has been hidden from us. It's been dormant because there was nothing there to expose that split. Now, last time we were able to take a glimpse to see that split being activated was when Jared Kushner presented his peace plan, from peace to prosperity, the Trump plan, how do they call it? The deal of the century, right? Suddenly you had pragmatic right-wingers saying this might not be a bad idea. And messianic right-wingers saying this is a catastrophe. So for the first time, the Trump peace plan did not divide Israel's left and right. It divided Israel's right and right. Now, normalization will do that, exactly that. Because in order to reach normalization, there'll be a Palestinian price. The P word will have to be said, Palestinian state, the P word, okay? And there will also be, it's not that a Palestinian state will be formed and there's going to be a military withdrawal from the West Bank or Judea and Samaria. There's not going to be any real, I assume, if it's according to the Trump plan, any real security risks for Israel, but it does probably mean limitations on settlements. It means that the dream of greater Israel is not going to be materialized. So that creates a division between the pragmatic and conservative right and the messianic right. Now, dividing the Israeli right might be amazing news, because when the Israeli right is divided, that means that the pragmatic conservative right joins the center and the center left, which themselves became much more hawkish ever since October 7th. Much less messianic, the left-wing version of of utopia of peace and two-state solution, harmony, and all that. And which means if the right is divided into two and the pragmatic part joins the center and the center-left, that means Israeli politics has a new architecture. It's not divided between right and left, but divided into three, not into two, where you have a passionate, bold, rational Zionistic center, and you have the utopians in the extreme. The left-wing utopia and the right-wing utopia are left out. And so which means that normalization might not only generate a process that will heal the region, it might generate a process that will heal Israel. But this all depends on, is Bibi going to go for this? And here's two assumptions that I think both there's high chances that they're right. One, only Bibi could do this. Because only Bibi could take the Israeli right and break it into two and take the more pragmatic, rational, conservative part with him and divorce from the only Bibi could do that. Because if normalization would be led by someone that's not Bibi, you'd have the Likud voters against normalization. Only Bibi could bring a large chunk of Likud voters to normalization. So only Bibi could divide the rights, and not someone that's not Bibi will unite the right against normalization. I mean, maybe it's possible that a Naftali Bennett could do this. Maybe, I don't know what you think. But Bibi probably has a better chance of putting this together. On the other hand, Bibi's coalition can never do this. Now let's live with that tension. Only Bibi could do this, and Bibi's coalition could never do this. And if you think about that, that means that if we're going to normalization, we're probably going also not only to a massive change in the region, we're also going into a massive change in the architecture of Israeli politics. Things are going to get very interesting if this goes on, if this continues.
I think the word that you started to say but didn't finish saying is divorce. Only Bibi could divorce from the extremist right, and he is, of course, the one who married them.
That's right. He's in charge of the marriage, and he's probably the only one that could lead to this divorce. Now, is he up for it? I don't know. I have no idea. It's hard to know. So I'm not saying he is going for it. I'm just saying if someone could divide the right, it's Bibi, which means Bibi's legacy has to turn against Bibi's coalition. That's the big tension in the black box that's within Bibi's brain right now.
In terms of legacy, I feel like the Iran-Israel war spun it away from the October 7th failure. I think he successfully weathered that. But the big question is, will he weather divorcing the extremists? That's right. Harnessing the rak lo bibim, the just not Bibis.
I'll tell you, the 12th Day War is also a metaphor. The symbol of the rak lo bibi, of the protests, of being against this government full-heartedly, one of the symbols was the pilots. And because they were a massive part of the anti-Bibi demonstrations, and some of them made the mistake of threatening not to show up if there was a war. Okay, so that was really the symbol. And then Bibi is a symbol of the right-wing, anti-deep state, anti-pilots, anti-elites, all that rhetoric. Bibi was playing that game also. And then the 12th Day War is a story of Bibi and the pilots working together to bring the tremendous success in Iran. So you would hope that Bibi voters will say, well, maybe the Israeli elites, which...
Isn't that you, Micha?
What?
Aren't you the Israeli elite here?
Nobody wants to be the elites. We're all the people.
Exactly.
We're the people.
Just teasing.
And you ask, do Bibi supporters could say, hey, those elites that we said they were progressive, post-Zionist, they're the ones who saved us. So I'm not saying support the elites, but maybe you have some admiration for them. And then maybe the anti-Bibi camp, which is against Bibi, and they have so many reasons, and some of them are very good. But you realize, but also Bibi saved the day in the 12th Day War. So maybe he's not only evil. The yin and yang, ancient symbol, is that the yin and yang could complete each other. But a precondition for them to complete each other is that there is a presence of the yin in the yang, and the yang and the yin, right? There is that dot of the yin and the yang, right? And there is that dot, there's a So only when you see the world not in binary categories, where it's complicated, if anti-Bibi could see Bibi is bad, but there's some good in him. And the anti-elites thing, they're bad, they're whatever, but there's some good. They saved us in October, in the 12th Day War. So is that metaphor of the 12th Day War, of Bibi and the pilots working together, is that a metaphor that could help, that could guide us, inspire us in rebuilding a new architecture for Israeli politics? I must say, I want to be very cautious. Nothing that Bibi is saying today points to that direction. Bibi is speaking about normalization. He's not speaking changing the architecture of the region. He is not speaking about changing the architecture of Israeli politics. But one must ask, the only way to pull off normalization is by a new political alliance in Israel. He can't pull this off with this coalition. And without Bibi, you can't pull this off to begin with. So we're living in such interesting times. Something is going to happen here. Something is going to happen here, and if there's a change in the region, that will have to lead to a change in the architecture of Israeli politics.
And in all of this scenario, for you, Hamas survives.
No, I don't think Hamas has the right to survive. Personally, I think that that the way Israel should play this out is make a deal. Make a deal now, as quickly as we can. Bring our brothers and sisters, bring our brothers home. When I say our brothers, because the 20 people that are alive are our brothers. But eventually, this war is not over. I think Hamas is not going to give us one, but 17 reasons to attack it. And I think we should choose the timing of a surprise attack over Hamas. And I think if Israel goes to war now with Hamas, another war, Israel's not united behind this war. And Israel doesn't know how to win wars that the people are not united behind. Look at Lebanon 1, right? And on the other hand, look at Chomat Magen, defensive shield in 2002. It was Shimon Peres and Arik Sharon united. By the way, Israel knows how to win wars. When, like the Six-Day War, there was a national unity government. Begin joined the government. So Israel knows how to win wars when it's united. It doesn't know how to win wars when it's divided. That's Israeli history shows us that very clearly. So if we go to war now with Hamas, one, it's a war that the Israeli people the majority don't believe in anymore. And two, the fact the hostages are there limits our ability to dismantle Hamas because we're very careful because the hostages are there. So if we bring our brothers home now, and a year and a half from now, go in a surprise attack on Hamas, the combination of unity, surprise, and not having our hostages there means that we have much higher chances of dismantling Hamas, which with a much lower price. So just like the left got it wrong in the 90s when it said peace now, the only peace that's possible is not the peace that comes now. I think the right is wrong when it says victory now. The only peace over Hamas that's possible is not the victory that comes now. Making a deal does not neutralize, it's not victory, it's a precondition for victory.
Micah, thank you so much for all of your time today.
Thank you, Amanda.
Thanks for listening to the Times of Israel's What Matters Now. I'm Amanda Borschel-Dan. If you have any comments or questions about this or any other episode, please drop us an email to podcast@timesofisrael.com. This episode was produced by the Podwaves. Until next week, Shalom.